The savanna trembled as a pack of ruthless hyenas closed in, teeth bared and eyes burning with hunger. Mason, the weak cub no one believed in, darted into the chaos, alone, outnumbered, and limping. His desperate move could save the pride, dead, pride or doom them all. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The sun beat down mercilessly over the golden waves of the savanna grass, a relentless furnace baking the earth beneath. Amidst this sprawling wilderness, life was a brutal contest of strength and survival, where only the strongest thrived. Mason, barely 6 months old, felt the heavy weight of this truth every day. His limbs were smaller, his frame leaner than the other cubs who tumbled effortlessly over the uneven ground, their growls already hinting at future power. Mason's limp was a constant reminder, a stubborn echo of a careless tumble months ago, an injury that never quite healed right. While others ran ahead, he struggled, each step a painful calculation. His breath came ragged and shallow as he watched the pride from the rear, his amber eyes flickering with a mixture of longing and resentment. The other cubs sneered when he tried to play, their sharp teeth flashing in mock smiles. Even the adults, particularly his uncles Luke and Aaron, exuded disdain whenever they glanced his way. Those two lions were the pride's dominant hunters, sinewy and fierce, their muscles rippling beneath tawny coats that gleamed under the sun. They had no patience for weakness, and Mason was the embodiment of it. To them, he was a burden, an anchor slowing the pride down in the ruthless dance of survival. Luke's eyes, cold and calculating, often fixed on Mason with a thinly veiled scorn. "He'll never make it," Aaron once hissed under his breath during a hunt, loud enough for Mason to hear, but not quite loud enough to confront directly. The words cut sharper than any claw. Mason's mother, Sarah, sensed the truth in their eyes, even as she fought to shield her son from the harshness of the world. She was fierce herself, her protective instincts a constant barrier between Mason and the dangers lurking beyond. But in quiet moments, when the pride rested under the sparse shade of an acacia tree, she too allowed doubt to cloud her gaze. Could this fragile cub survive the savanna's merciless tests? The memory of the morning's hunt replayed relentlessly in Mason's mind. The pride had encircled a massive wildebeest, its powerful legs thrashing desperately against the grasp of fate. The air had been thick with tension, the thunder of pounding paws, snarls, and the sharp scent of blood. When the beast finally fell, the adult lions claimed their prize with raw, primal authority. Mason's heart pounded with hope as the herd settled, the promise of nourishment drawing him closer. But that hope was swiftly extinguished. Luke and Aaron were first to the carcass, their fierce growls cutting through the air like a storm. They shoved aside the younger lions and cubs with ease, their dominance absolute. Mason tried to edge forward, hunger gnawing at his belly, but Luke's cold glare stopped him in his tracks. "Stay back, runt!" Aaron snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. The word runt was more than an insult, it was a verdict. Mason's small size, his awkward gait, the limp that marked him as less than whole, all combined into a symbol of weakness that the pride rejected. Mason's stomach twisted, pain, both physical and emotional, stabbing at him. The hot wind seemed to mock his vulnerability as he sank to the dusty earth, forced to watch as the brothers tore into the flesh, claiming their survival with brutal efficiency. He was the last thought, the forgotten shadow lurking on the edge of the feast. His mother's eyes met his briefly, filled with a silent apology, a flicker of sorrow that somehow deepened the wound. But within Mason, something stubborn refused to die. A flicker of defiance burned behind those weary eyes. He knew he was weak, slow, and different. The limp was more than an injury, it was a curse in the unforgiving world of the savanna. Yet beneath that frailty lay a heart that beat fiercely, craving not just survival, but respect, recognition, and a place in the pride's unforgiving hierarchy. He didn't want pity. He wanted to prove that even the smallest, weakest lion could have strength worth fighting for. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the plains, Mason slowly rose to his feet. His muscles trembled with fatigue and pain, but his spirit refused to bend. Somewhere deep in the distance, the roar of Luke and Aaron echoed, a harsh reminder of the power Mason had yet to claim. But for the first time in his young life, Mason felt a spark of something dangerous. Hope born from contempt, a fragile but fierce resolve to rise above the scorn and survive the brutal world that rejected him. The sun hung low and heavy in the sky, casting long shadows across the savannah as the pride gathered around the carcass of the wildebeest. The air was thick with the sharp, metallic scent of blood, mingling with the dry dust stirred up by shifting paws. The atmosphere was taut, tense with the hierarchy that governed every inch of this harsh kingdom. Every movement, every growl, every glare spoke of power, survival, and unyielding rules. Mason crouched near the edge of the circle, his body taut with hunger and cautious hope. The sharp pang in his belly was a constant reminder of his vulnerability, gnawing away beneath the bruises his pride had inflicted. He watched as the stronger lions tore into the fresh kill with practiced ferocity, muscles rippling beneath tawny hides, teeth shredding sinew with brutal efficiency. Luke and Aaron, the dominant brothers, feasted with arrogant entitlement, their eyes never straying to the smaller cub at the fringes. Their disdain was a palpable force, a barrier more impenetrable than the thorns of the acacia bushes nearby. But amid the roar and growl of dominance, a quieter presence made itself felt. Jake, the alpha male, lounged a short distance away, his golden mane a halo in the waning light. His eyes, deep and steady, scanned the scene with an unsettling calm. Unlike his brothers, Jake's gaze softened as it landed on Mason. It was a look that carried the weight of experience, of battles fought both within and beyond the pride, and of a memory buried beneath the scars of leadership. Jake remembered the fragility of youth, the trembling first steps, the failed hunts, the loneliness of not yet belonging. He recalled how the savannah once seemed an endless expanse of danger, how the sting of rejection could scar deeper than any wound from claws or teeth. In Mason, Jake saw a flicker of that same vulnerability, but also something rarer, a quiet determination that refused to be extinguished by weakness. A low rumble emanated from Jake's throat, resonating through the tense air. It was a sound both commanding and gentle, a signal that rippled through the pride like a wave. Heads turned, growls momentarily stilled, muscles tensed in confusion and resistance. Luke's eyes narrowed, his body stiffened, and Aaron's lips curled in a silent snarl. Yet beneath the defiance, there was a flicker of respect, a recognition of the alpha's will. With deliberate care, Jake shifted, his powerful shoulder brushing against the carcass. He nudged a chunk of flesh toward Mason, the movement slow, purposeful. The prize, fresh and glistening with blood, slid across the dust and came to rest mere inches from the cub's paws. The act was simple, yet profound, a breach in the unspoken code of survival, an offering that rippled with meaning beyond mere sustenance. Mason's breath hitched, his body stiffened in disbelief. The eyes of the pride bore into him, a mixture of suspicion, grudging acceptance, and quiet astonishment. He hesitated, then, trembling, extended his paw and touched the meat. The taste was raw, metallic, but it ignited a fire within him, a lifeline thrown across the chasm of his isolation. As Mason began to eat, the tension that had knotted the air slowly unwound. The sharp edges of scorn softened. The pride shifted imperceptibly, a collective breath released from clenched jaws. Jake's steady gaze never wavered, anchoring Mason to a new reality, one where weakness did not condemn, but could be met with mercy and potential. Tears blurred Mason's vision, but they were not tears of defeat. They were the weight of years lifted, the first warmth of acceptance warming the cold bones of loneliness. Compassion, an alien yet powerful force, wrapped around him, threading hope through the cracks in his spirit. This was more than a meal. It was a covenant, a silent promise that the pride saw him, that his place was not just tolerated, but guarded. In that quiet, fragile moment, the unyielding savanna seemed to bend just enough, making space for the weak to stand and for the strong to recognize strength in unexpected forms. The sun dipped lower, shadows lengthening as Mason ate. Somewhere deep inside, a seed had been planted, a fragile but fierce conviction that he might one day claim his own roar. And the pride, for the first time, was beginning to believe it too. The dawn filtered through the thorny branches, casting a muted glow over the sprawling plains, where Mason labored beneath the watchful eyes of the pride. The savanna was a harsh crucible, but Mason's resolve had hardened like tempered steel. Each morning, he pushed his body beyond the limits imposed by his limp, every strained step a defiance of the weakness once etched into his very bones. Yet it was not brute force that propelled him forward. It was a keen, calculating mind honed by necessity. He had learned early that raw power could not make up for what he lacked. Instead, he cultivated patience, precision, and an unyielding will to adapt. The daily drills were grueling. Mason's muscles trembled with exhaustion, but his amber eyes blazed with a determination that pierced the skepticism still lingering in the pride's gaze. His strides grew surer, his limp less pronounced, as he focused on refining his balance and timing. Jake's faith was the steady drumbeat behind his progress, an unspoken endorsement that fueled Mason's every movement. The pride watched from the shadows, hesitant at first, but curiosity began to bloom into cautious respect. Luke and Aaron, once scornful and dismissive, now exchanged glances tinged with a grudging acknowledgment. They observed Mason's hunting technique, a blend of stealth, agility, and strategic patience, unlike their own raw, overpowering approach. Mason's movements were a quiet symphony of calculated risks. He anticipated the prey's behavior, exploiting its patterns rather than overpowering it with sheer strength. Slowly, the pride's hardened perceptions began to crack. Under the pale light of the full moon, Mason lay in wait, muscles coiled like a spring, senses stretched taut. The night was alive with whispers, the rustle of grass, the distant howl of a lone jackal. Mason's keen hearing caught the faintest scrape of paws on dirt. A small herd of impalas grazed near the ridge, oblivious to the danger lurking. His body moved fluidly through the shadows, a ghost on silent paws. The hunt was not about glory, but survival. Every catch a thread in the fragile fabric of the pride's existence. When Mason returned, the impala in his jaws was not the largest, nor the most magnificent, but it was proof. Proof that weakness was not destiny, and that adaptation could carve a path where brute force failed. Luke's eyes, usually sharp with derision, now held a flicker of something new. Admiration. Aaron's stiff posture softened, his lips lifting in a rare, approving curl. Mason sensed the shift, like the subtle change in the wind before a storm. It was not merely his hunting that transformed the pride's view, it was the quiet courage that shimmered beneath his scars. When the hyena pack descended on their territory, a ruthless shadow threatening the balance, Mason's moment arrived. The hyenas were cunning and relentless, their snarling ranks pressing the pride into a defensive frenzy. Adults growled, muscles tensed, but the odds weighed heavy. The ground trembled beneath the pounding charge of enemies, whose hunger matched their malice. Mason's response was swift and deliberate. He darted through the tall grasses, weaving between thickets and rocks, his breath steady despite the pounding heart. Using the knowledge he had gathered from days of observation, Mason lured the hyenas into narrow ravines where their numbers became a disadvantage. His movements were erratic, unpredictable, a blend of speed and cunning that kept the pack off balance. The adults, freed from immediate threat, circled and regrouped with newfound strength. In the midst of chaos, Mason's small frame was a blur of defiance, a beacon of hope and resilience. He darted in, distracting the lead hyenas with sudden charges and sharp growls, drawing their focus away from the pride's vulnerable members. His lungs burned, muscles screamed in protest, but he pressed on, driven by a fierce pulse of loyalty and courage. The pack faltered, confusion rippling through their ranks as the trap tightened. When the dust settled and the hyenas retreated into the shadows, the pride gathered, panting but triumphant. Jake's gaze met Mason's across the clearing, a silent exchange heavy with unspoken pride. The cub who had once been shunned, mocked for his limp and perceived weakness, now stood as a pillar of strength forged not from muscle alone, but from heart, intelligence, and unyielding spirit. The pride's roar that night was not just a claim over territory, but a celebration of transformation, a testament to the truth that strength wears many faces. In Mason's steady amber eyes, the pride saw a future redefined. Strength was no longer merely the brutal power of claws and jaws. It was the compassion that lifted the weak, the courage that shattered doubt, and the fierce will that carved greatness from adversity.